There's this website, freesewing.org, that creates free sewing patterns based on how you want them and or your exact measurements. This is a great resource for poor people, plus size people who have a hard time finding clothes we like in our sizes, and trans people. I don't just say it's great for trans people because you can make clothes that fit non-cisnormative body proportions. The second, more important reason is this guy. The trans community online has, for some reason, become obsessed with IKEA's Blahaj. And it is a very cute shark. I like it too. But I don't really have the money to spend on stuffed animals right now, nor any particular desire to give it to IKEA. What I do have is a big box of jean scraps that I bought last year in a manic episode. Upon learning that free sewing had a sewing pattern for a stuffed shark that can look a lot like a Blahaj if you choose, my spouse had the mean idea for a Jlahaj. I resisted at first, but after encouragement from the free sewing community and moving somewhere where I have more room for sewing, I decided to give it a try, and I'm really glad I did. I didn't have any white denim, so I used a dark blue for the blue parts and a light blue for the white parts, with a tiny bit of gray for the mouth. For the teeth, I cut up the white pockets from a pair of jeans I've already started scrapping. Not denim, but still jeans, so I think it contributes to the authenticity of Jlahaj. This fabric is really thin though, and woven as opposed to the felt recommended for the teeth, so I had to do it differently. With my spouse's help, I cut out 2 pieces for each jaw, so that solves the thinness problem. Then for each jaw, I carefully blanket stitched them together on the decorative edge that would be the teeth. This solved the brand new problem of multiple rows of teeth and should hopefully prevent or at least decrease fraying. The eyes were little tiny pieces of black denim that I hand sewed on, first with a white dot and then with a brown edge. This didn't actually look very good, and I was concerned about fraying because with the dark thread on the dark fabric, it was hard to tell where it actually secured the edges. So I changed that later on. I wanted to use Golden Jeans top stitching thread for the gills for the jeans aesthetic, but unfortunately I did not yet have any, so I had to wait until I could go to the store. Embroidering the gills was supposed to be the next step, but I was hyper-focused and wanted to keep sewing, so I reordered the directions and machine sewed the darts on the face first. Fortunately, once I had the thread that I needed, the darts didn't really get in my way, but if you don't have something stopping you from doing all the embroidery first, I would still recommend following the steps as they are on the website. I embroidered the gills by hand, mostly because I was too lazy to change the thread in my sewing machine, and I discovered that I love the way this thread looks on the denim. In that moment, I realized it doesn't matter if my shark's eyes have similar colors to the original Blahaj, since nothing else does, and decided to resew the edges with this new thread. It's a lot thicker than the original thread I used and a lot brighter, so I was able to secure the eyes really well with it, and the color really pops. It's now extremely obvious that I did it by hand and that I'm not that great at embroidery, but if you would judge me for this, you aren't allowed anywhere near my Jlahaj anyway. When I sewed the teeth to the mouth, I decided to hand baste before machine sewing so that I wouldn't have to take the pins out while I was sewing, and also to give me a guide on how far away from the edge to stitch to make sure I caught all of the pieces. This proved successful, and after sewing the above mouth pieces together wrong not once, but twice, I decided to pre-hand baste the majority of the seams from then on. This also helped with those seams that were hard to know where you're sewing, although loose stitches don't pull and keep the fabric together as much as pins, so I occasionally had to readjust. Most of the instructions flowed pretty logically, so I rarely had to stop and look at them. Excluding the embroidery and fixing the occasional screw up, this project probably only took me about an hour or two. Once I had assembled the body and turned it right side out, I did an edge stitch around the fins and tail to get more jeans aesthetics. I didn't particularly feel like all of the fine-tuning and risk it would take to get my sewing machine to go through 4 layers of denim and look good, especially with a new thread that's thicker than anything I've used on it before, so I did this part by hand too. Before stuffing, I just did a normal straight stitch near the edges, but afterwards I went back and repeated it the opposite way so it looked a little more like a seam you might find on a pair of jeans. The reason I did some of it before stuffing was just so that those edges would be flat and the stuffing wouldn't go through my sewing plane. But once the first straight stitch was sewn, I didn't have to worry about that. So I stuffed the shark, making sure to get all I wanted in the fins before stuffing the body too much, and then I whip stitched it close. He's a little just like me for real, and his tummy didn't really fit in his jeans, but we managed.
At least he thought about it.
Thank you.
Is it supposed to be wrinkly?
Yes.
Oh, because
It's shaping the...
So it's not just a amorphous blob. Blahaj, if you will.
There might be some commentary of yours that I hear, or that's in the recording, that I will ask you if I can keep in the video.
Yeah. I'd be fine with you keeping the Blahaj bit in.